15 things every American neighborhood had before life moved indoors. Screen doors slammed, lawnmowers hummed, and voices carried easily from one yard to the next. Before so much daily life moved behind closed doors and glowing screens, the neighborhood itself was part of the household routine. People did not have to be close friends to know one another. They saw who left early for work, whose children were outside, and which family had relatives visiting for the weekend. In a Brooklyn row house block, that life might gather on stoops and sidewalks. In a Midwestern town, it might happen across adjoining lawns or beside a detached garage. In a newer Sunbelt suburb, the driveway, carport, or front yard often became the place where neighbors stopped to talk. The details change from place to place, but the pattern was familiar. More of ordinary American life happened where the people next door could see it. Number 1. Neighbors sitting on porches, stoops, and driveways. A front porch once did more than decorate a house. It put people where the neighborhood could find them. In older city neighborhoods, adults sat on concrete stoops or front steps after work. In small towns, broad porches offered shade and a view of whoever passed along the sidewalk. In post-war suburbs, the gathering place might be the driveway, carport, or a pair of lawn chairs near the garage. Those chairs were often the lightweight aluminum kind, with woven webbing stretched across the frame. Someone might carry out iced tea, coffee, a newspaper, or a cigarette and settle in for a while. The point was not always to visit anyone in particular. You simply sat where life was passing by. A neighbor walking the dog might stop. Someone getting home from work might lean against the car for a few minutes. A child could be sent down the block with a message and return with neighborhood news. There was very little ceremony to it. You did not arrange a meeting 3 days in advance. You stepped outside, saw somebody you knew, and an ordinary evening conversation could begin without anyone planning it. Number 2. Talking across fences and property lines. Property lines were real, but they did not always end the conversation. A chain-link fence could separate 2 backyards while still letting neighbors talk face-to-face. Low picket fences, hedges, alley gates, and even an invisible line across the grass served the same purpose elsewhere. One person watered tomatoes, while another hung laundry or carried out the trash. A few words about the weather could become a discussion about work, children, cars, or the rising price of groceries. People often rested their forearms on the top rail while they talked. Sometimes a garden produced more than one family could eat. Tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, or zucchini crossed the fence in bowls and paper bags. Children also learned the geography of those boundaries. They knew which yard they could cut through and which neighbor preferred that everyone use the sidewalk. They knew where the friendly dog lived. They knew where a ball over the fence required a polite knock at the gate. The fence marked the property line and gave neighboring households a natural place to stop, lean, and catch up. Number 3. Borrowing sugar, flour, and tools across the lawn. Running out of something did not always send a family to the store. Sometimes it sent someone next door. A cup of sugar, an egg, a little flour, or a stick of butter might be borrowed before supper. The request often began with a knock on the screen door. Weekend projects created a different kind of borrowing. A ladder moved across the yard. So did a wrench, garden rake, extension cord, or socket set. If a lawnmower refused to start, a neighbor who knew engines might wander over to take a look. If a car battery died in the driveway, there was often a neighbor nearby with jumper cables and a few minutes to help. These were small exchanges, but they created a steady rhythm of favors. The borrowed bowl had to be returned. The ladder came back after the gutters were cleaned, usually with a quick thank you exchanged across the yard or at the door. The person who helped with your car became the person you helped when they needed another pair of hands. Neighbors did not have to be close friends for this to work. Living only a few steps apart made everyday cooperation practical. Community sometimes began with nothing more complicated than knowing which door to knock on. Number 4. Dropping by without calling ahead. A visit did not always begin with an appointment. In many neighborhoods, someone could simply walk over and ring the bell. Before answering machines became common, and long before mobile phones, there was often no easy way to announce every casual visit. A neighbor might come over for coffee. Someone might stop by to return a dish, ask a question, or share a piece of news. In warm weather, the visit might never make it past the porch. The host could stand behind the screen door for a moment and then invite the visitor to sit. Sometimes the timing was inconvenient. Dinner might be half prepared. The house might not be tidy. That was part of the social arrangement. People saw one another without every encounter being staged. A person could stay 10 minutes or an hour, depending on how the conversation developed. This habit also meant there was less privacy than many people expect today. Neighbors could be helpful, but they could also be curious. If a strange car sat in your driveway, somebody usually noticed. If relatives arrived unexpectedly, the block often knew before supper. Being known could feel comforting. It could also mean that very little escaped attention. Number 5. Familiar route. Workers everyone recognized. Some of the most familiar faces on a block did not live there at all. They worked a route through it. The walking mail carrier was a regular part of many neighborhoods. A leather satchel, uniform, and predictable arrival made the carrier easy to recognize. Newspaper boys and girls also became familiar figures, often riding bicycles or walking house to house. Morning papers landed on porches, steps, or driveways before many families were fully awake. In the 1950s and early 1960s, some neighborhoods still had regular milk delivery. Glass bottles could arrive in an insulated metal box near the door. Older residents sometimes remember the clink of bottles before breakfast. That service declined as supermarkets, refrigerators, and changing shopping habits reshaped household routines. It was never equally common everywhere, especially by the 1970s. Other neighborhoods had bread routes, dry cleaning pickups, or local delivery drivers known by sight. What made them familiar was seeing the same faces week after week. The same workers passed through the same streets week after week. Children recognized them. Dogs certainly recognized them. And the route worker became another small piece of the neighborhood's daily clock. Number 6. Corner stores and local shops as community hubs. A neighborhood store could be much more than a place to buy something. In dense city blocks, it might be a small grocery, delicatessen, candy store, or drugstore on the corner. In small towns, it could be the local market or pharmacy near the center of everyday errands. Older suburbs often had a small shopping strip close enough for many residents to reach without a long drive. The owner or clerk might know regular customers by name. They often knew their children, too. A parent could send someone down for bread, milk, cigarettes, or an ingredient missing from dinner. Children went for gum, soda, comic books, or baseball cards. Some local stores informally carried a tab for trusted families. The details depended heavily on the community. The social role was familiar. People crossed paths there. They heard who was sick, who had moved, and which teenager had just started a first job. A store could become a neighborhood bulletin board without an actual bulletin board. Buying one small item sometimes took 10 minutes because somebody you knew was already standing at the counter. Number 7. Saturday morning yard work and car washing. In many post-war suburbs and small towns, Saturday morning had a recognizable soundtrack. One lawnmower started. Then another answered farther down the block. Soon the smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with gasoline, damp pavement, and car wash soap. Garage doors stood open while people carried out rakes, hoses, hedge clippers, buckets, and tools. Someone trimmed a hedge. Someone washed the family sedan in the driveway. Someone else leaned over an open hood and tried to understand a noise from the engine. These chores pulled adults outside at roughly the same time. That made work surprisingly social. A neighbor crossed over to admire a new car. Another offered advice about a patch of brown grass. Two men might talk for 15 minutes while one of them held a garden hose. Children were assigned smaller jobs. They swept the driveway, picked up sticks, or carried grass clippings. Nobody needed to organize a neighborhood gathering. The weekly routine placed people outdoors together anyway. By noon, the block often looked freshly worked over, and everyone had heard everyone else's mower. Number 8. Bicycles scattered across lawns as neighborhood signs. A bicycle lying in the grass could tell you where the children had gathered. Several bicycles meant you had found the center of activity. In the 1950s, many children rode sturdy cruisers and hand-me-down bikes. By the late 1960s and 1970s, high-rise bicycles with banana seats and tall handlebars became especially recognizable. Schwinn Stingrays became one famous example, though plenty of children rode other brands. Bikes were often personalized in inexpensive ways. Playing cards clipped near the spokes gave a bicycle that familiar fluttering sound as a child pedaled down the block. A basket, horn, streamers, or improvised decoration made one bike easier to recognize than another. To adults, those bicycles were useful information. A mother looking for her son might see his bike beside another family's porch. A father driving home could tell which yard had collected the neighborhood children that afternoon. The bicycles functioned almost like location markers. They also showed how freely children moved through the nearby streets. That freedom depended partly on adults knowing one another. The bicycle on the lawn was visible to the whole block. So was the child who owned it. Number 9. The vacant lot, or dead-end street, as common ground. Every community seemed to have some space that belonged officially to no gathering, but unofficially to everyone. In one neighborhood, it was a vacant lot between houses. In another, it was the dead end of a quiet street. City children might use an alley, schoolyard, or patch of pavement near the buildings. Suburban families might gather near a cul-de-sac or undeveloped parcel at the edge of newer construction. Children certainly played there. But the space mattered to adults too. Parents could look out from porches, kitchens, garages, or front yards and see who was around. Neighbors crossing the area stopped to talk. Older children watched younger ones, simply because they happened to share the same ground. The place did not need benches, signs, or official programming. A tree could mark one boundary. A parked car marked another. A worn patch of dirt showed where people gathered most often. These informal spaces gave neighborhoods somewhere to overlap. They were neither fully private nor formally public. They were simply where the block happened to meet. Number 10. The neighborhood's informal watchfulness. Long before the phrase neighborhood watch appeared on signs, many streets practiced an informal version of it. Adults knew many of the children who lived nearby. They recognized coats, bicycles, voices, and family routines. If a child behaved badly 3 houses from home, there was a fair chance the news would arrive before the child did. One mother might tell another that her son had crossed the busy road. A neighbor could send children away from a construction site or an unsafe creek. Someone sitting on a porch noticed when the youngest children wandered too far. This did not mean every neighborhood was safe. Nor did it mean every adult was trusted equally. American communities differed sharply by place, class, race, and local conditions. Where families knew one another, supervision often extended beyond a single household. Parents sometimes relied on a loose network of familiar eyes. That network gave children more room to roam nearby. It also meant that privacy was limited. The same neighbor who watched out for you could also report exactly what you had been doing. Number 11. The ice cream truck bringing everyone to the curb. The sound came before the truck. A bell or simple melody drifted down the street, and made people look up. Children stopped what they were doing. Adults heard it too and knew exactly what was about to happen. The particular company depended on the region. Good humor was familiar in many places, while Mr. Softy became strongly associated with others. Local operators used their own trucks, bells, and routes. What mattered was the shared signal. Children ran toward home for coins. Screen doors slammed. Someone shouted from the sidewalk that the truck was coming. Within a minute, several households might spill toward the curb. Parents stood nearby while children studied pictures of cones, sandwiches, and frozen bars. For a few moments, separate houses gathered around the same moving storefront. Then, the truck pulled away. Children remained on steps, lawns, and curbs, trying to finish before the heat melted everything. The event was small. The stop lasted only a few minutes, yet everyone nearby heard the truck arrive and watched the curb suddenly come alive. Number 12. Trusting a neighbor with the house. Going away for a few days often involved more than locking the front door. A trusted neighbor might be told that the family would be gone. They collected the mail or newspaper. They watered plants. They carried trash cans back from the curb. They sometimes fed a pet. In many households, a spare key was given directly to someone nearby. Others hid a key in places that would seem remarkably obvious today. The arrangement worked because neighbors already knew the normal pattern of the house. They knew which car belonged in the driveway. They knew whether a porch light usually came on at night. If something looked wrong, they were close enough to notice. Having someone nearby who knew the household routine made the arrangement work. A neighbor trusted to watch the house might know exactly when you left and when you returned. That practical dependence strengthened local relationships. People did favors because they expected to need favors themselves someday. Watching the house was not a professional service. It was another exchange between people living only a few steps apart. Number 13. Block parties and street closure cookouts. On certain summer weekends, a neighborhood could turn an ordinary street, driveway, courtyard, or backyard into a shared gathering place. In city blocks, organizers might obtain permission to close a street and mark the ends with sawhorses or temporary barricades. In suburbs, the gathering could spread across adjoining driveways, backyards, or a cul-de-sac. Apartment residents might use a courtyard or nearby common space. Folding tables appeared first. Then came aluminum chairs, coolers, paper plates, casserole dishes, and charcoal grills. A round Weber grill became a familiar backyard sight by the 1960s and 1970s. Adults moved between conversations, while children circulated freely through the gathering. A radio supplied music. Someone watched the hamburgers. Someone else brought too much potato salad. The 1976 bicentennial gave many American communities an especially memorable reason for parades, cookouts, and neighborhood celebrations. Long before and after the bicentennial, neighbors were already gathering around grills, folding tables, radios, and whatever food families brought outside. For a few hours, the street or yard stopped belonging to one household at a time. For a few hours, the space between separate homes felt like one big outdoor room, filled with familiar faces. Number 14. Parents calling across yards for supper. Evening had its own neighborhood communication system. It did not require a phone. A mother or father stepped onto a porch, back step, or sidewalk and called a child's name. In apartment neighborhoods, a parent's voice might come from an open window and carry down to children gathered on the sidewalk below. Some families used a whistle, a bell, or another signal their own children knew. Voices carried across yards and between houses. The first call might be ignored. The second usually carried more authority. Other parents were doing the same thing nearby. One by one, children disappeared toward home. Adults gathering outside also began to break off conversations. Someone closed the garage. Someone carried chairs back toward the porch. Screen doors opened and slammed shut. The important memory was not simply that children were being called home. The whole neighborhood could hear families gathering back into their houses. Supper time slowly emptied the common spaces. Number 15. Porch lights coming on as the neighborhood quieted. Dusk did not arrive all at once. It moved, house by house. A porch light clicked on. Then another appeared farther down the street. Kitchen windows began to glow. Cars that had been sitting in driveways disappeared behind garage doors. People finished watering gardens and carried tools inside. A last conversation ended beside the fence. A newspaper was picked up from the steps. A bicycle rolled home from the next block. In some regions, cicadas filled the warm air. Elsewhere, crickets or distant traffic became more noticeable as human voices faded. The porch light was practical. It illuminated steps and made a front door easier to find after dark. But it also became part of the evening rhythm. The neighborhood that had been open and visible all afternoon gradually withdrew into separate houses. Not every home closed at the same moment. That was what made the change so memorable. You could watch the block settle down, one light at a time. What many people miss is not one particular object or custom. It is the amount of ordinary life that happened between the houses. The porch, driveway, fence, corner store, vacant lot, and sidewalk all created reasons for people to encounter one another. Those encounters were not always warm. Neighbors could gossip, they could interfere. They could know far more about your family than you wanted them to know. But repeated contact also made practical trust possible. People borrowed tools because they expected to see the lender again. They watched a house because they knew what normally happened there. They recognized children because those children crossed the same lawns every afternoon. They knew the mail carrier, the shopkeeper, and the family 3 doors down. None of that required everyone to be close friends. It required people to be visible often enough to become familiar. Today, many of the same houses, streets, and fences are still there. What changed most may be how much less of daily life has to pass through the shared space outside. A screen door can still slam. A mower can still start on Saturday morning. And a porch light can still come on at dusk. For someone who remembers the old rhythm, those small sounds can bring an entire neighborhood back.